In the dimly lit recording studio of 1961, Judy Garland stood before a microphone, her voice trembling not from nerves, but from a profound understanding of heartbreak that few artists ever truly grasp. What happened in those sacred minutes would forever change how the world heard pain, vulnerability, and the raw power of slowing down time itself. This is the story of how a simple tempo change became one of music's most devastating emotional weapons. A moment when Judy Garland didn't just sing a song. She rewrote the very language of lost. By 1961, Judy Garland's career hung by the thinnest of threads, like a spider's web glistening with morning dew, beautiful, but one breath away from destruction. The woman who had once been Mangim's golden child, the voice that had carried Dorothy over the rainbow, now found herself battling demons that no yellow brick road could lead her away from. Studio executives whispered behind closed doors about her unreliability, her struggles, her desperate attempts to reclaim a glory that seemed increasingly elusive. But Capitol Records saw something different. They saw an artist who had lived through every emotion the human heart could hold, and they knew that pain, when channeled correctly, could create magic. The Carnegie Hall recording session was meant to be her comeback, live album that would remind the world why Judy Garland was irreplaceable. Little did anyone know that in this hallowed venue, she would discover a technique so powerful it would redefine what it meant to break hearts through song. The pressure was immense. This wasn't just another performance. This was survival. Judy understood that every note, every breath, every pause would be scrutinized. She had to be perfect, but more than that, she had to be real. And in that tension between perfection and authenticity, something extraordinary was about to emerge. The song had been written years earlier, passed between artists like a whispered secret, but it had never found its true home. It was a ballad about lost love, about the kind of regret that settles into your bones and never leaves. The lyrics spoke of chances missed, words left unspoken, and the particular agony of knowing exactly what you've lost. On paper, it was beautiful. In most voices, it was merely touching. But in Judy Garland's hands, it would become something else entirely, a weapon of mass emotional destruction. During rehearsals, Judy had performed the song conventionally, following the original arrangement with its steady, predictable rhythm. The musicians nodded approvingly. The producers smiled, but something felt hollow. The song was technically perfect, emotionally correct, but it lacked that indefinable quality that transforms music from entertainment into experience. It was during a late-night practice session, when the studio lights were dimmed, and most of the crew had gone home, that Judy first experimented with slowing everything down. What started as exhaustion, her voice too tired to maintain the original pace, became revelation. As the tempo slowed, as each word was given space to breathe and echo, the song transformed. It was no longer about telling the story of heartbreak. It was about living inside that heartbreak, about dwelling in each moment of pain until the listener had no choice but to feel it too. The few remaining people in the studio fell silent, understanding they were witnessing something unprecedented. There's a psychological phenomenon that occurs when music is slowed beyond its natural rhythm. Time itself seems to bend, creating space for emotions that normally rush past us in the hurried pace of everyday life. Judy Garland, whether through instinct or genius, had discovered this secret. By taking a song that typically ran 3.5 minutes and stretching it to nearly 6, she wasn't just changing the tempo. She was altering the listener's relationship with time itself. Each word became a small eternity. Each pause allowed heartbreak to settle deeper into the soul. The original version of the song had been about remembering love lost. Judy's version was about experiencing that loss in real time, over and over again, with no escape and no relief. The slowed tempo created what music therapists now recognize as a hypnotic state, a place where the usual defenses we build against emotional pain simply dissolve. The musicians initially struggled with this new approach. Jazz players accustomed to swing and rhythm found themselves in uncharted territory, forced to find beauty in restraint rather than flourish. But as the sessions progressed, they began to understand that they weren't just backing a singer anymore. They were participants in an emotional ceremony, priests in a temple of heartbreak, where every note was sacred and every silence was heavy with meaning. The evening before the Carnegie Hall recording, Judy sat alone in her hotel room, staring at her reflection in the mirror of her vanity table. The face looking back at her told the story of a woman who had lived a dozen lifetimes before reaching her 40th birthday. The bright-eyed girl from Grand Rapids, Minnesota, who had once believed that talent and determination were all you needed to conquer the world, was long gone. In her place sat a woman who understood that sometimes the greatest victories come from embracing your defeats. She had been thinking about the song all day, about the way it felt different when slowed down, about how the stretched-out notes seemed to create room for all the pain she had been carrying. There's a moment in every artist's life when they realize that their scars aren't something to hide. They're the very thing that makes their art authentic. For Judy, that moment came while practicing in the quiet of her hotel room, her voice floating through the darkness like a prayer. The realization was both terrifying and liberating. To perform the song the way she envisioned would require her to strip away every defense, every professional distance she had learned to maintain between her public self and her private pain. She would have to sing not as Judy Garland the performer, but as Frances Gumm the human being, raw, broken but still breathing, still hoping, still believing in the power of music to heal wounds that seemed too deep to ever close. Carnegie Hall had seen legends grace its stage, but on that April evening in 1961, something different was in the air. The audience didn't just come to hear Judy Garland sing. They came because they sensed she was fighting for her life, and they wanted to witness either triumph or tragedy. The energy was electric, charged with the kind of anticipation that only occurs when everyone present knows they might be witnessing history. Backstage, Judy made a decision that would change everything. She instructed her musical director to ignore the original arrangement they had rehearsed for weeks. Instead, she wanted to try the slower version, the one that had emerged from those late-night sessions, the one that felt like walking through heartbreak rather than simply singing about it. The musicians exchanged glances, understanding that they were about to venture into uncharted territory without a mapped out as she walked to center stage. The applause was thunderous, but Judy barely heard it. Her mind was focused on the emotional journey she was about to take, not just for herself, but for every person in that audience who had ever loved and lost, who had ever felt the particular agony of knowing exactly what they were walking away from. The spotlight hit her, and in that moment, Judy Garland ceased to be a performer and became something more dangerous, a confessor, ready to lay bare the human heart. The opening notes came not as a song beginning, but as a wounded bird testing its wings. Judy's voice, usually powerful and confident, emerged tentatively, almost whispered, drawing the audience into an intimacy that concert halls rarely witness. The slowed tempo immediately signaled that this wouldn't be entertainment. This would be communion. Every person in Carnegie Hall leaned forward unconsciously, straining to catch each carefully placed word. The band followed her lead with the reverence of musicians who understood they were accompanying something sacred. The piano notes fell like tears, each one given space to resonate before the next arrived. The strings entered like gentle hands reaching out to comfort, and the entire arrangement breathed with the rhythm of a grieving heart. This wasn't just a different version of the song. It was the song reborn, transformed from a simple ballad into an emotional archaeology of lost dot, as Judy's voice grew stronger, but never rushed, never hurried past the pain. The audience began to realize they weren't just hearing a performance. They were experiencing a masterclass in human vulnerability. The slowed tempo forced everyone present to sit with each emotion, to feel the weight of every word, to understand that some experiences can't be rushed through or glossed over. They must be lived, note by note, breath by breath, tear by tear, between the words. In the spaces where most singers would rush to the next phrase, Judy let silence live. These weren't empty pauses, they were pregnant with meaning, heavy with the weight of things unsaid, of chances missed, of love letters never written. The slower tempo created room for these silences to exist, and in existing, they became as important as the words themselves. The audience found themselves holding their breath during these pauses, afraid that any sound might shatter the spell being woven around them. Music theorists would later analyze this performance, trying to understand how slowing a song by nearly half could double its emotional impact. They would speak of psychological time dilation, of how the human brain processes extended musical phrases, of the way anticipation builds when resolution is delayed. But in that moment at Carnegie Hall, none of that mattered.